How can a low-budget filmmaker make $3 billion for Hollywood? Well, I'm going to explain that in more detail later in the video. But if you're a middle-aged filmmaker, pro-creative or creative director, then you're in the right place. And thanks for tuning into my channel. This is only my second video that I put up in the past week. I have had a previous YouTube channel before where I put up a lot of my work content and other links to creative work that I've done over the past 30 years, but I didn't really maximize that channel. I didn't look at the channel as something that I wanted to put valuable video information on to help people like yourselves. And now I'm absolutely doubling down in 2025 as a content creator and a film director and producer with over 30 years experience. I thought it was about frigging time that I actually got my shit together and created a YouTube channel where I could talk about all of that experience in a really honest, open and transparent way with no BS, just honest to God life experiences, mistakes that I've made, and really just the love of the craft that I do, but also to give you some really, really genuine, down-to-earth, simple life hacks to help you if you're one of these people now that you're actually in a creative rut, if you're stuck, if you're finding that you're stressed out or you've lost love for what you love doing in filmmaking, or if you procrastinate, or if you've got a bad habit, if you're drinking too much, if you're overeating. Mostly though, if you're absolutely stressed out at work doing what you love to do, because that's what happened to me. And my journey started, you probably hear from my accent, I'm originally from Liverpool. My accent's gone a bit, but if I can put it on quite easily like that, mates, but you just won't understand what I'm saying, so most people have left the video by now. Anyway, Stephen Graham's Making Scousers, very popular at the minute with his amazing show of Adolescence on Netflix. Shout out to him if you haven't watched it already. An absolute hero of mine as a filmmaker and a creator. My background is very working class. My mum and dad never owned a car, never owned a computer, flew on 2 holidays in their lifetime. And so I come from a place called Wiston, which isn't actually Liverpool itself. It's about 5 or 6 miles east, and anyone from up north will tell you, if you say you're from Wiston, they'll call you a woollyback, not a scouser. Anyway, I've lived with that for all my life. And when I say to anybody that I'm from Liverpool, they always ask me the same frigging questions. Which football team do I support? Am I into the Beatles? Yes, I love the Beatles. No, I don't support any football. If there's any football fans here, then I've suddenly lost you from my channel. Well, sorry about that. But I've only ever been to one professional football game in my life, and the funniest thing happened on the way to this football game. My mate picked me up and he drove one of those three-wheeler vehicles from Only Fools and Horses, and we're driving to the match on a Sunday, and he's in the front chatting to his mate like this, chatting away, and I'm sat in the back, and I can see that we're heading towards another frigging car. Literally, we're only going about 10 miles an hour, but I'm in the back going, mate, 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 and he's just gabbing away, and we literally hit this car, maybe at 6 miles an hour, but those three-wheeler Reliant Robin cars are made of fucking polystyrene, and the thing just crumpled. It literally just went brrrr, and the car crumbled as it hit the other car, and we all literally stood up in the street. The car evaporated, and we stood up and stepped out the car as it crashed and looked at this vehicle on the road, and it was mashed. And my mate was having a hippie fit. He was losing his shit, going, oh my God, my car. And we just could not stop laughing. Thankfully, we were fine. It was literally just a burning engine surrounded by the seats and the shell of this car. So anyway, that was the only and last time I went to a professional football game in Liverpool. And I digress. I love movies. You probably see I'm adorned with lots of Jaws merch. Yes, I'm a Jaws fanatic, and that's what got me into filmmaking in the first place. Literally on my 7th birthday, Jaws was released in the UK on Boxing Day, and not a lot of people know that. It was released in the summer in the US in 1975, but in the UK it was released on Boxing Day, so it was like the tail end of a Christmas movie, which was weird. So my birthday's in January, so my mum and dad take me to see Jaws on my birthday. And I've got the t-shirt, I've got this rubber shark. I mean, I'm 7 years old, I don't know what an effing shark is. So we go into this movie, and unbeknownst to me, my mother is terrified of the ocean, and particularly because you don't know what's down below you. So I didn't know this. In the first 5 minutes of Jaws, clearly Chrissy gets eaten alive naked in visual and audible terrifying fashion, and my mother is practically having a heart attack, and I'm sat next to her, and she's reaching over to me like this, trying to stop me from seeing this woman being eaten alive, literally screaming at the top of her lungs like ah! and as her hands come away from my face, You know, I missed the opening sequence. I turned to my mother and she's like white. She's like white as a sheet. And I just think, holy shit, what is this? Where am I? And it literally was like a penny dropping. I thought, people are paying money to sit down in a chair for 2 hours. The lights go down. In those days, we had curtains that opened to see the movies. And I was just absolutely enraptured. I was like, this is it. This is everything. And I was completely and utterly obsessed. But in that moment, I remember as clear as day, I decided I have to get involved in filmmaking. I have to get involved in creating whatever that is on the big screen. And every weekend my dad would say, do you want your pocket money? And I'd be like, no, go see Jaws. So like literally 7 weekends in a row we went to see the movie, and I just knew every line, I knew all the characters, and it just, to this day, I'm still obsessed by it. And you know, 50 years anniversary this year, which is amazing. But I know it's become like this modern classic because it created the genre of the blockbuster summer movie, so they say. Also, but as a movie, you know, everything went wrong on that film. Anyone who's watching this, you know the story of the making of Jaws was an absolute disaster because Spielberg, being the young, courageous film director that he was, wanted to have realism, so he shot it at sea, and that caused all manner of trouble because the shark kept breaking down. But that helped the movie because when you couldn't see the shark, they really spent time on the character and the dynamics and the dialogue. And to this day, I still think it's one of the greatest monster movies ever made in terms of showing the dynamics between the characters, you know, what they're dealing with, but also how real that it feels. There's so many shots in Jaws that are like 1 minute takes that I absolutely love. And just the characters themselves, you know, none of them were major movie stars. John Williams' score is an absolute masterpiece. All of these elements, as a 7-year-old, that were going through my brain, that would obsess me for all of the years to where I am now, I'm grateful for. I'm grateful to Spielberg, I'm grateful to the movie, and I still love it to this day, and I love the fact that it has gained such notoriety with fans all over the world. As an aside, I did end up working on the movie. This is going to get back to me answering the question how a low-budget filmmaker like me made $3 billion. But I will be getting to that point in more detail very soon. But to that point, one of the campaigns that I did work on was Jaws being released on DVD for the first time, because Universal Home Entertainment became one of our biggest home entertainment clients, and they hadn't released the movie in a box set form. So I actually had to revisit the film, edit a completely new trailer, and they had like a new behind the scenes. And I did this for Universal Home Entertainment in the UK, but they were liaising with Spielberg in the US because clearly, you know, it was a big deal that his classic Fish movie was coming out on DVD for the first time. Knowing the film as well as I do, now you know that about me. And I edited this trailer, and it was just a joy to revisit the movie and create this different trailer for it. And I sent it to him, or sent it to them, they sent it to him, and he literally replied the next day, and he said, like, holy shit, whoever edited this trailer has seen this film more times than anyone alive. And he just signed it off. Literally, there was one tweak, and he signed off the trailer. I may put the trailer in here now for you to see, so check that out here.
Amity Island has long been known for its clean air, clear water, and beautiful white sand beaches. But in recent days, a cloud has appeared on the horizon of this beautiful resort community. A cloud in the shape of a killer shark.
It was the summer of '75. 30 years have passed. But the fear and the phenomenon still swims on. The 30th anniversary special edition of Steven Spielberg's classic, Jaws, is back with more bite.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
And more bonus features than ever before.
I think he's come back for his noon feeding.
With a rarely seen from the set 1974 Steven Spielberg interview.
He said, I can't do it.
A 2-hour behind-the-scenes look inside the classic movie.
That's just great.
A cutting-edge interactive 3D great white shark feature.
It's really a miracle of evolution.
Deleted scenes, outtakes, and much more. Catch and collect the ultimate summer blockbuster that started it all.
Fire, you son of a bitch!
Jaws, 30th Anniversary Special Edition 2-disc DVD.
For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Surfacing soon.
God, please, no!
So that was a dream come true to actually further on in my life to like indirectly or directly work on the movie and have Spielberg say that about a trailer that I edited for one of my favorite films of all time. Anyway, let's go back in time to me in Liverpool, and there was very few, there are still, or well, there was then, in the late 80s, early 90s, very few film schools in the UK. There was the BBC Film School, there's the National Film School, and then there were a variety of, there was a film school in Bournemouth, I think, and in West Surrey College, but there was a real limit on where you could go and study film and video. And so I spent 3 years working on my O-levels and A-levels and an art foundation course and just getting my video portfolio together. I practically had every video camera, from the really chunky VHS cameras right through until this Osmo Pocket camera that I'm using now with my iPhone as the second camera. So throughout my whole filmmaking career, I've used every effing camera you could imagine known to man and woman. So back then, I spent a lot of time just, even then I was creating little promos and videos and trailers, not knowing that that would become one of the main things that I would end up doing. And this is one of the key things of why me as a low budget filmmaker made $3 billion for Hollywood, and I will explain more in a little bit. Then I applied to West Surrey College of Art and Design, WestCAD it was called at the time, and I had to write an essay on Ken Loach's Kes, which I knew a lot of film schools at that time, they were really into the British social realism, but Kes to me is up there with Jaws as one of my favourite British realism films, and Ken Loach is one of my all-time heroes in terms of Brit filmmaking. Again, if you look at the likes of Adolescence and what Stephen Graham are doing, you can tell that he's watched his Ken Loach and his Mike Leigh movies. So I managed to get into this film school, and at the time, only 26 of us got onto this course, and it was 13 men and 13 women. And there were 6,500 applicants. So for me, it was a huge life-changing moment that I was able to move from working class Liverpool, go to Farnham and to attend film school for the first time. It was literally like a dream come true, and it was one of the biggest crossroads in my life. But when I got there, it was just a rude awakening. You know, all of those images I had that it was going to be like the LA Film School, or like where Coppola and Spielberg and De Palma and all of those filmmakers went in the US. It wasn't like that at all. It was basically like a yuppie southern art college / film school where there were a lot of middle class students that had basically got into college because mummy and daddy had decided, oh, you're into movies, into media, we'll palm you off to film school. I was basically a northern contingent. There was me from Liverpool, and there was another guy, a dear friend of mine, I hope he doesn't mind me name checking him, called Andy Spencer from Birmingham, and we were put in the same room together in the same dorm because we were like the two people from up north. We were north of London. Everyone else was like from down south on the course. Oh no, I tell a lie. Alison Thompson, bless her heart, she was from Liverpool as well. So Andy and I are in this dorm together, and I've already got posters on the wall of like Raging Bull, of Jaws, of Blade Runner and other things. And literally we're there about an hour, and the third year film students come crashing into our door, kick the door in, and they look around the room and they're like, oh, you are. So they said this thing, they said, you're too into movies to be a filmmaker. And they walked out the room. And I was just like, what the fuck was that all about? We're at film school. You know, I've got movie posters on the wall. Is that not seen as a done thing? But apparently it was just like, you know, that was uncool. And it soon dawned on me, this was like 1990, folks. So it was a long time ago, that most of the people there, this was the time when ecstasy was like becoming really big in the UK, and there was a very big student union bar, and most people on that course just ended up getting pissed and going on raves at the weekends. That's what most of the students were doing. And that I had no interest in doing any of that shit. I'd never taken ecstasy. Drink just wasn't my thing. That's kind of like the world we fell into. Saying that aside from that, there still were about maybe 5 or 6 of us. There was an amazing guy called Jake West, I hope he doesn't mind me calling him out, who actually is a prolific horror and sci-fi film director and producer. And there was Jake Knowles, who was basically, he was the spitting image of Jimi Hendrix. There was a friend of mine, Dave from LA, like the LA contingent, and you know, he's gone on to work in film. And Simon Hunter, who actually directed a British film called The Lighthouse. So there were maybe 6 or 7 of us that actually loved making movies and were into films. So that was just about enough to get us through the 3 years where we could actually bounce ideas off one another and just talk movies all the time. So that was my 3 years at film school. I left there in 1993, and my first official media job was basically being a production assistant at MTV Europe, which is in Camden Town. And this was an amazing 6 months, even though they didn't pay me anything except expenses, because the place, it had its own gym. I mean, it had every single VHS of every pop video you could imagine in the world at the time. You know, we're still talking, folks, this is before the digital revolution. This is before the internet. I know some of you watching this who are a bit younger can't imagine a world where you don't have an iPhone, or you don't have a screen, or you don't have the internet. But it did exist, folks, not so long ago. My entire film career traversed the analog and digital revolution. To have a 20-year career that went across that whole spectrum was just fascinating, of how things change and how quickly they change. But also, it's one of the reasons that I got so stressed, because when the digital revolution kicked in and we had non-linear editing, we had the very first system at the time, and it must have cost us like 60 or 70,000 pounds. And it was, I mean, it was so clunky. It crashed almost like every day when I was editing for clients, and it would just used to drive me insane. Today, when we have the likes of Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere and DaVinci, those non-linear editing systems are a dream. I would have killed to have had systems like that when I first started my work. Anyhow, back to MTV. My boss at the time at MTV was a chap called Peter Doherty, and he found and managed the Beastie Boys, and he was from New York. But this guy, he was a double-edged sword, because he was ferocious. Like, he scared the shit out of me. He ruled with a rod of iron, and he was so driven and determined, but he just knew his stuff. I mean, he was on it, man. So he was my first real experience of someone within the industry who had that background. And in our department, we actually probably remember MTV had those awesome animated idents of the MTV logo. So MTV produced their own, but there was a lot of independent filmmakers who would basically send in show reels of their animation or other things to see if they would get chosen to create these idents. And MTV didn't pay them, but they sometimes would pay the production costs of producing these amazing idents. And for me, it's still one of my favorite things about MTV is those various animations. And so I was managing basically the content to create those idents, which was an amazing first thing to be doing, you know, as a young guy in his 20s in London, in Camden Town, on the lock. You know, I would come out of work and be like right in the centre of buzzing London. At that time, I lived in Brixton initially, and then I lived in Islington. And then when my job took off, which I'll talk about in a minute, then I ended up living and working in Teddington in Surrey for 18 and 19 years. But MTV at the time was amazing because they had the Unplugged. And so literally in the basement at Hawley Crescent, they would have the bands play live. So you'd literally have like Bjork turn up, you'd have Nirvana turn up, and they would literally be downstairs playing Unplugged, like with a guitar and someone else, and you could just go down and hang out and just watch the gig as it was being broadcast live on television. And that, you know, blows my mind to think about it at this day, the amount of times I would like finish at work and just literally walk down the steps, and there you would have somebody literally just performing, and literally as they're performing, look at the TVs around the building and see it being played live. Amazing. So MTV, I quit that after 6 months, and I was broke. I'd just broken up with my girlfriend from film school. I had practically nowhere to live. And as well as movies, I've always been fascinated and into art history. And so literally I just decided I have my backpack on, I'm just going to go to Florence, Italy, and just kind of get a one-ticket flight to Italy, turn up with a backpack and see what happens. Literally, I was just going to change my whole life. I had no money. I didn't speak Italian. You know, talk about being naive at the time, but I was literally backpack on. I had my ticket going to the airport, and I was stood at the escalator at Camden Town, and I'd been to one job interview for this production company called Momentum Productions, and they wanted basically a production assistant to help them with the content. And I'm just about to step on the escalator, and my little mobile phone, we did have mobile phones in those days, but they weren't like they are now. My mobile phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and they said, "Darren, you've got the job." And so there was this moment of like, do I take this job or do I go to Italy? And again, another one of those life-defining moments that I decided I'll take this job. And that job ended up turning into a 20-year career for me, where I ended up working on 2,500 movies. And by my saying I'm working on 2,500 movies, the company that I joined, Momentum Productions, which we changed our name 10 years in because we needed to rebrand, because at the time we were doing a lot of work for Momentum Pictures, who sadly no longer exist. And there was always confusion of when we'd meet them, like they kept saying, people keep confusing us with you and you're getting confused with us, would you consider changing the name? Also at the time we wanted a rebrand, we wanted to move away, and so we ended up calling ourselves Firebelly. And so Momentum Productions then was a creative agency that would produce film marketing materials for film distributors. So let me unpack that a little bit if you don't quite understand it. So a director will make a movie for, let's break it down. So he makes a movie for Universal. So Universal will hire the director, they'll come up with the budget, they'll make the movie. Universal themselves will own that movie, more or less. And so they have the rights to how they distribute it in cinemas, how they distribute it on home entertainment, and nowadays how they distribute it across streaming channels. But the studios themselves don't produce the trailers that you see in the cinemas, they don't produce the TV ads, they don't produce the movie poster, they don't produce the digital assets. Some of that has changed now, so some of them do have creative teams in-house, but then they didn't. And so what they would do is they would hire external creative agencies to produce that content for them. And there's a real advantage to that because it gives them a separation from the movie, because sometimes the studios are too close, but mostly they're just busy with the day-to-day running of producing these films, of booking the advertising, booking the cinema spaces, doing all of, arranging the premieres, doing the press, doing the junkets. So they've got enough things to deal with without dealing with how to make the movie trailer, how to make all the marketing material and the assets. So as a separate creative agency, we would come along and produce the cinema trailer, the TV ads, the radio ads at the time. Over the 20 years, we did move into digital when digital became a thing in marketing. So back to the original title of my video of how did a low budget filmmaker like me make $3 billion for Hollywood. This is how I've broken that down. I looked at all the movies that I worked on in that 20-year period. And our biggest client was Disney. We worked for Universal, we worked for Lionsgate, we did a little bit of work for 20th Century Fox, and we also did a lot of work for smaller art house independents. But I spent time literally breaking down every movie in that 20 years that I worked on, and it more or less approximated about 2,500 films.
Wait, what?
And so what I did then was I looked at the box office results that film made predominantly in the UK, because we were a UK-based creative marketing agency, although we did work for Buena Vista International, so we did work on campaigns internationally as well. And also, as well as cinema, we worked on home entertainment. But I basically created a spreadsheet where I broke down all the movies, all the box office results that it made in the country at the time of release. An example is Kill Bill. Another great story with Kill Bill is that absolutely thrilled when we got that campaign to work on with Tarantino, but it was an absolute nightmare to work on because Tarantino notoriously edits his films really, really late before they get released. And also, he brings his movies to a cinema in Brixton in London called, I think it's the Ritzy or the Roxy, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because his first film, Reservoir Dogs, was so beloved by the UK press when he had the screening there that he uses it as like a good luck charm. And so his first screening in the world, he would always fly to London to the Roxy or the Ritzy, forgive me for getting the title wrong, and he would show the first screening of his new movie in that cinema. I don't know if he still does it now, but that's something that he used to do. Kill Bill, we were already working on the TV spots campaign and the radio, and the first TV spot was airing on the Monday, and Tarantino was flying to London and showing the film on the Saturday. No one had seen the movie then. We could only get hold of the whole movie after Tarantino showed it to that audience. So it was an insane week of deadlines, because as soon as he showed the movie, we were then sent a print. We'd written the scripts, but we then had to literally go through the whole movie. And it's not a short movie, Kill Bill, folks, as you know, if you've seen it. We had to then go through the movie and create the TV commercials on the, like 24 hours on the Sunday, submit the commercials to be cleared by the BBFC. I'll do another video talking about who they are later. It's that's another interesting story if you don't know who they are. The British censorship classification here in the UK. You can't show anything in the cinemas or on television or play on the radio without them seeing the content before and them deeming it viable for UK audiences. So we had a 9 o'clock watershed because I think the film was adult because of the certification. I think it was an 18 with all the chopping of the samurai swords. So we're editing these TV spots literally on that Sunday to be approved by Disney and Tarantino that were going to be here on the Monday. We made it just about, and you know, again, an amazing campaign to work on, but that was in an insane deadline period. And this is something else that I'm going to talk about on my channel in terms of filmmakers and creative directors who get burnout, because there were weeks that I was working on 5, 6, 7 campaigns and I was liaising with 20 plus clients of those campaigns I was working on, and it was just too much. It was just complete and utter meltdown. And I'm a creative person. For me, the favorite part was working on the edit, was working on the script, you know, and then all the client liaising and all working with the team to get it done. They just got a point doing this work further on that it just became so much too much to do that's where I hit lots of walls. And this is one of the main reasons I'm doing this channel as well, is to talk about those walls that we hit, particularly when you're working with clients. That's one of the hardest part, because those of you watching who work with clients, particularly within the film industry, or you know, particularly within the media industry, you know how demanding they can be. They want something and you still think it doesn't work, that it has to go in some way, and there's a really fine balance to how you do that, but it can be draining. It can be absolutely effing draining.
You ain't kidding.
There's one of the commercials that I made for Kill Bill, followed by Kill Bill 2, where I came up with one of my favorite copy lines, which was the mother of all endings. Kind of gives away the twist in the film, but hey, great copy line.
They left her for dead.
Don't you ever wake up.
Now it's to hell with revenge.
It's kill or be killed, and I choose kill.
Uma Thurman. Kill Bill.
I've killed a hell of a lot of people to get to this point. I'm the deadliest woman in the world.
That woman deserves her revenge, and we deserve to die.
You and I have unfinished business.
You ain't kidding.
Back to how a low-budget filmmaker like me can make $3 billion for Hollywood. I listed all the movies that I worked on, 2,500, looked at the box office that they made specifically in the UK, and then basically what I did was break that down and allocate the amount that box office made to say that, you know, within reason, it wouldn't have made that box office without the trailer, without the TV commercials, without the radio spots, and allocated 10% of that box office that it made to the creative that me and my team produced. And I think that's a reasonable guesstimation, because I know there were certain campaigns that we worked on where we didn't do trailers for low budget films, we didn't have TV commercials, we didn't have radio spots, they had very limited press, and they made nothing. This was in the day where this kind of content had a huge impact, and still to this day the movie trailer is the biggest marketing asset of any movie. A lot of you will know, you know, now all the trailers land on YouTube, and you can tell very quickly whether a film is trending from how many views it's getting on YouTube. I am going to do another video about trailer making and top tips about doing that, but also the pros and cons. But also the biggest grumble that a lot of people have is that why do they show too much in the trailer? And there's some very, very good reasons for that, which I won't go into now, but I will go into a future video. And again, let me know in the comments if that's of interest to you. I'm going to basically put content on this channel that I think is valuable to filmmakers, to creative pros, and to creative directors. And if there's something from what I'm telling you now about my experience that is a burning question that you want to know more about, or you've got an idea for a future video that you want me to do, then please put that in the comments, and I will do my very, very best to really go into the detail of answering that question as best as I can with all the experience that I've had. I'm going to end this. It's been quite a long video, this one, folks, and I will do a part 2 and a part 3 to this, because I'm not going to try and get it all into one video, my 20 and 30 years of working in film. But to answer the main question, I think the 10% is a really reasonable percentage and figure to allocate to how much the marketing contributed to that box office. And that's what I did. I literally just allocated 10% to those 2,500 movies from Screen International, from Box Office Mojo, and I had all the box office takings of all of those 2,500 movies, and allocated 10% to films that we worked on, that our marketer, that our trailer, that our TV spots, that our radio spots, that our press would have helped that movie garner the box office that it did. And for example, back to Kill Bill, I think Kill Bill did end up making over £20 million. I think it was more like 26 in the UK. And at that, even that figures today is pretty awesome. And I know from speaking to people, friends, colleagues who went to see the movie, people watching terrestrial television and watching a TV spot after the 9 o'clock watershed was one of the key selling factors of getting people into the cinema. And that went across so many films that I worked on, from Calendar Girls, Pirates of the Caribbean. We could really see a correlation between a really strong TV campaign, really strong radio campaign, a really strong press campaign, and how that would affect the box office. $3 billion is the figure. Like, it was actually more. But I just thought, put in more, people are going to go, get the fuck out of here. You know, who is this guy? What's he talking about? BS. But literally 10% from all of those box office earnings from all of those movies over that period of time in 20 years comes to over $3 billion. That's how a low budget filmmaker like myself was able to generate $3 billion for Hollywood. I hope that has helped answer the question of the thumbnail, and I hope you found this video interesting, entertaining, and there's so many more stories, folks, that I'm going to go into, like campaigns, people I worked with, premiere parties that I went to. I'm going to do a whole different video on premieres, because there was a time in London when the movie premiere was the hot ticket in town, was the place to go, and the premiere parties that I went to, some were insane. Romeo and Juliet, where I met Leonardo DiCaprio, literally bored shitless. No one was taking any notice of him because they were just getting shit-faced. Literally, I mean, that party was insane. And so, you know, he was like bored, like his bouncer was there. This was like, I think it was maybe a couple of months before Titanic came out, so he wasn't the huge star that he is now, but I was still a huge fan of his from What's Eating Gilbert Grape and other movies. And so I wasn't into, again, as I said earlier, I wasn't interested into the partying element. To hang out with Leonardo DiCaprio at one of my favorite movies again. Look, I'm not name dropping here, I'm literally just telling you how these things panned out. And there were other absolutely mental premiere parties. Starship Troopers, From Dusk Till Dawn premiere party in London at the Ministry of Sound. I don't want to get people into trouble, but I'm probably going to do a whole video on that party. That party was insane. They had Prodigy were playing live in the basement. They had all the Harley Davidsons outside the Ministry of Sound, like in the movie, and they were projecting that F scene, you know, when they go to the club and there's that Harley Davidson bike rider and he's using all the F-bombs. They were literally projecting that scene, blasting out into the streets at full volume. Anyway, that party was insane. And again, please say in the comments if you're someone that attended some of these crazy mad premiere parties in London. This is the time when film distributors would literally spend £1 million or £2 million on a premiere, because they knew that the press the next day, the tabloids, they would cover these premiere parties and they would get the press. And to actually get press is really, really expensive in the days of like above the line advertising. So they knew if they spent £1 million on a premiere that they would almost like balance out, that they would get that much press coverage. Nowadays it's not like that at all. Premieres are still a thing, but then they were the thing. They were the key events, where stars would turn up, the press would be there in abundance, and you would get amazing coverage across all the tabloids. That was a golden time of movie premieres. So I will in future videos go into some more of those stories. If you're interested, if you're not, then put that in comments, but there's some great stories I'm going to share here. Coming to the end of this video, it's been a bit of a long one. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I answered the question about the $3 billion and you don't think that's a lot of BS, but I think it's a pretty reasonable claim, and I'm really looking forward to doing more videos on this channel. I want this to be a community of filmmakers, creative directors and creative pros, middle-aged men who have been through a similar experience that I have.
Trying to think.
Do you remember you used to play at all? I've just completely forgotten.
Who feel that you're in a rut, that you're stuck, that your creative mojo's died, or you're just like, things are just not working for you. And particularly if you've got a nagging habit or something that you keep doing that is just getting in the way, because I've been through them all, folks, and I'll go into more detail about that. But thanks for watching this video. Write in the comments, as I said, if you've got any other ideas, and be safe, be creative. I look forward to putting up another video very soon. Bye for now. See you later.